So yeah, I thought it would be great to, especially like today we're entering this second lockdown. Sadly, we are again in the same situation, but I thought it was nice, well, not nice, but it was a good opportunity, this lightning talk, to talk about like what has happened for us during the first lockdown. And I just wanted to tell a bit the story of like how our team adapted and pivoted quickly during that time and what kind of learnings we did get from that. So just before we get started, okay, let me just handle this. Yeah. A bit of context about who we are. So for those of you who don't know us, we are ASOS and we're a fashion online retailer. Our mission is to become the world's #1 destination for fashion-loving 20-something. I know a lot of like 30 plus who think of themselves as still 20-something, so it's not just for 20 years old. A few numbers just to tell you about like the kind of scale at which we operate. So more than 23 million active customers in 2020. 85,000 fashion items available at any given time from a lot of different brands. I think the number is a bit higher, but I'm just going to play it safe here, put this number here. And we ship worldwide, so we have like 3 fulfillment centers across the globe. So these numbers, they're important for us because as the AI platform, what we do is to deal with data. And our main mission as AI and machine learning platform is to develop, deliver, and maintain machine learning models. These models, they either improve, the aim is either to improve the customer experience, or they are here to optimize the way we do our business. So some examples, obviously, one of the most important ones that we have is our recommendation engine. How can we help the customers navigate through the huge list of products we have available on the website and the apps? We do have some models to help optimize our marketing spend, and especially around the digital platforms. How do we make sure that we target the right people? Pricing is increasingly important, and how do we have an automated way to deal with this kind of like pricing problems for each of our individual items. We're also entering like NLP capabilities and chatbots. This is aimed to improve our customer care operations. And last but not least, and this is what I'm going to talk about during this talk, is about our stock and demand forecasting. So let's go back in March 2020. I'm sure everybody remembers where they were, and this seems like very far away now. The world has completely changed now. So the World Health Organization declared COVID-19 as a pandemic just before we moved into the UK lockdown, which happened, I think, around the end of March. Our team started to fully work from home. And what we've been witnessing is big change in the way the demand was, like everything was shifting, and like the kind of forecast that we had around like the demand and the sales were like no longer relevant. So we really started to think about like how can we help the business operate in this uncertain time, and it felt like we were still operating and delivering this machine learning model and working sprint by sprint to deliver those models, but it didn't feel right to keep on focusing on these day to day because the world was completely changing. So we really wanted to have a pause and just think about like how can we just maybe have a different approach and just regroup on there. So the first thing that we did, and that was back in March, we started to create what we call the COVID-19 task force. Not very happy with the naming of this, but this is the first thing that came to mind. So it was about assembling a team of data scientists and engineers. I remember at that time we had a PhD student intern who just started with us at the beginning of March, and he was thrown into this team, especially it was at the time where we were all working from home. And the initial phase during this month of March, where everything was uncertain, was about like gathering some information, experimenting and scoping, trying to understand how can we help the business in this like difficult time. So we started to work in short sprint cycles with like really time box activities. So it was really quite high effort and with a lot of catch-ups and pair programming to adapt to the new working from home setup. This was also adapting to the new way of working where we're no longer co-located, but we have to be working all together and adapt to this like screen by screen kind of environment. And at the end of March, we identified the objective, and our main goal was to help the forecasting capabilities, especially during an uncertain time that was COVID-19. The next month, we started evaluating different approaches. One of the key things that we started to do is to engage with our finance stakeholders. These are people who are already like using a forecasting model. This was a year-on-year demand model, and this model was not really appropriate with what was happening. So we used this model as our baseline, and we started to do a lot of data collection, feature engineering, model prototyping. We also started to look at the Facebook profit model and learned a lot about it and how can we base different models to do that. I would encourage you to look into the Facebook profit model as a forecasting tool. The results of like at the end of this month, we managed to like create some basic models, and we managed to enter these daily trading calls. These are like very important calls here in ASOS, where every day the demand and the numbers were being like reviewed by a lot of people across the board. And it was the first time that we managed to enter like a more operational kind of discussion, and we were entering these kind of conversations. The next 2 months, we really worked hard on improving our forecast. What was key for us is to make the most of our existing infrastructure, especially all the infrastructure we had around our pricing models. It was also very important for us that we had some scientists who had like deep knowledge about those pricing models, and they were like very important for us to be able to do this kind of forecasting. We enriched the model with additional features. So some of the things that were in control, that we were in control, so like things like trading calendar, marketing activity, and delivery propositions, but also some other things like seasonality, whether COVID was active in the country, how did the different governments adapted to this. Even like we entertained the idea of like putting the weather in it. We did some work around putting some automation in place, so like all the engineering harness to make sure that we don't repeat some of the activities around like getting the data and training the model. And we worked a lot on model explainability. This was very important for us, especially when we engage with our stakeholders. It's not just good to say like, oh, we have a model, your model will be performing better than what finance people had. It's about like explaining how these models function and what's the thinking behind all those models. So like trying to break down how these models were functioning was very important to us. I think it was very successful for us in the end, because we secured the buy-in to create a new forecasting team inside ASOS AI. So we just like justified and demonstrated that we could have like this kind of forecasting capability within ASOS. Just to wrap up a bit like this story about what happened during those like 3-4 crazy months. What we've learned really was that it was good decision just to pause and to pivot quickly and to create this like kind of task force. But what was key for us was really to engage with our stakeholders early on and not just come after once we had like something that we wanted to present. It is very important to be able to explain, especially the finance teams. They are like highly numerical teams, so they know about like number crunching, and we just can't really need to explain a lot what we're doing there. Scientific approach, and this is tied a bit with the panel conversation, but this helped us, especially we were looking at like the different papers that were around, especially like some papers around forecasting the pandemic. Could we use those papers to help us forecast the demand? We chose not to in the end, because that was putting a bit too much complexity in it. So what we did instead was like to start simple and really make best use of our existing infrastructure and the knowledge, and then iterate on it by adding new features and trying to improve on the model. This was a great learning opportunity in the most unusual time. Our PhD intern really learned a lot about what it is to work in a company. In this kind of uncertain time, you learn about like, you don't wait, you just be proactive. You look at what's happening out there, and you really work closely with your colleagues. And it's okay not to have like all the desired results. It's just about like keep on having this conversation and iterating really fast. So just to conclude, I think most importantly, what we have demonstrated is how AI and machine learning teams can help in a fast-moving and uncertain environment. We really challenge this idea that we are really working on long horizons, on like big and complex projects with like very complicated pipelines. So we can like help the business by having like this kind of like fast iterative approach. And yeah, so that was very successful for us. And yeah, thank you.
Thanks, Reda. That was perfect, man. I've got a couple of questions already, so we're in a good place, and I can see a couple of other questions have come in as well. So, mate, as I mentioned at the start, I'm going to keep things moving quickly. Thank you for your talk. If I could get you to stop sharing now, and I'll invite Betty to come back, and I'll be back to you with the questions at the end, man.
Perfect. All right, talk to you later, Dave.
Thanks. Hello, Betty. Are you there? Are you there? Everyone's praying, please let Betty turn her camera on. We do not want to look at Dave any more than this. So yeah, keeping it moving quickly. As we mentioned at the start, Betty's a senior data scientist at Royal Mail. As you would imagine, they've got a huge amount of data, working at scale with some very interesting challenges. Betty's going to talk to us about how they can use, or how they use academic engagement to help them deliver their goals. So if I could ask you to share your screen, Betty. I will get out the way and leave it to it.
Right.
If not, I could tell a joke. I've got loads. Oh, saved.
Apologies about that. Yeah, it took a bit longer. Let's just quickly.
Okay, I'll get out the way and I'll see you on the other side. Thanks, Betty.
Okay, so hello everyone. I know, thanks Reda for that interesting talk. It's certainly a challenge at the moment with COVID, and I mean, what you've done here with the Data Science Festival is fantastic to, you know, like have this stretched over a month and having the sessions virtually. This is really nice that it could still happen. I'm going to talk a bit about Royal Mail. We have a strong data science team there and how we interact with academia and use the latest research basically to keep our customer promise. Just to give you a quick background on Royal Mail as a company. And the kind of data we're dealing with. So we have around 60 million customers, the whole of the UK. This is like 31 million households where we have a delivery 6 days a week because we're bound by universal service obligation. So we are visiting every household every 6 days a week. We have 115,000 post boxes. Over the year, we're delivering around 14.3 billion letters and parcels. And on peak days, this can be around 2.6 million parcels a day. And this number is increasing steadily, especially now as people are starting to order online a lot of parcel deliveries. At the moment, we're employing 140,000 employees. That's every 194th person in the UK of the working population. We have one of the largest fleets in Europe, 48,000 vehicles, including 2,900 trailers. And of course, looking at this variety of data and a massive amount of data, we have there's a whole set of opportunities for data science to work on. So that ranges from optimizing workflows to optimizing fleet utilization and maintenance to getting delivery windows to the customer and as Reda mentioned as well, mail and revenue forecasting for mail. Just a quick introduction to the data science team, to the fantastic data science team at Royal Mail. So obviously we come from a variety of backgrounds, not only country-wise, we're a very international team, but also from a diverse range of academic backgrounds. This includes ranging from physics, mathematics, biology, chemistry, up to even architecture and economics. We all share very strong academic background with a variety of degrees that we got in academia. So you could imagine how we're eager as a team to stay in touch with academia and with the latest research in our field, just to be able to use the next generation toolkits that are available for data science. As such, we have developed a whole academic engagement set at Royal Mail. We're working with several universities. And those include things like a data science seminar. We have had several publications in peer-reviewed journals. We have had several PhD students, master students, undergraduate projects, university, and we keep this engagement on by university visits, conference talks, hackathons. So we're really trying to be involved and keep this link to academia to be able to benefit from the research that's being done at universities. I'm going to show you two examples of how we implemented this at Royal Mail. So, and how we benefited from this. So one project is about efficiently avoiding road closures. So this was this involved a final master's project, and the other one was an undergraduate group project. So the final master project would be a few months, and the undergraduate project only 1 to 2 weeks or 3 weeks maybe. I think and just to showcase what are the capabilities of those interactions with academia. So this one here for the efficiently avoiding road closures. Just to give you a bit of a background, the problem here was that Highways of England are investing 27 billion until 2025 to redo a lot of the roads in England. And the issue we're having, because we're bound, we promised to the customer that first class delivery will arrive the next day. So our overnight trips are affected by these road closures, and we have to find ways to still keep this customer promise. Otherwise, we might end up getting a fine by Ofcom. So the solution here is a clustering project that we built based on historical GPS data from our heavy goods vehicles. That we then basically we use a recommender system as well, just to find the fastest or an alternative route with the highest probability of keeping our promise to deliver in time. We had master students working on this, and the advantage here was that the master students, often you have, when you work for a business, you have the problem that there's tight deadlines, and you can't just explore every possibility that you would like to. You have to stick to the deadlines. You don't have plenty of time. So having those master students around is brilliant, because for relatively low cost, you have additional people, brilliant minds that can help you investigate a whole new area of this whole problem. So in the end, you will come back together, you can do some hypothesis testing and see which one was more efficient or the better solution to this problem. We did that, and it was successful. So we're able to find probably a more effective solution than we would have if we didn't have this additional support from other brilliant minds. So we were able to keep our promise for next day delivery of first class items, and we found a really efficient way to find new routes, new alternative routes. Just to give you an idea how this looks like. This is a simple app that we built, where you have, where basically we get around 1 o'clock, we get 1,400 messages from Highways of England. We then have to filter them, find the relevant road closures, and then start recommending different routes. By 4 o'clock, they update those messages. So we have to do this again. So obviously there's an advantage of having this automated, what we did. Additionally, we have this whole recommender system behind it. So we're building up a database of knowledge where we can give better and better recommendations as we move along. And it has been very successful so far. So we already benefited a lot at Royal Mail. The other project I wanted to talk about that was an undergraduate project. And here the scope is quite different. It's more about scoping ideas for future projects that you could implement in a business. So obviously, Royal Mail, you think, we're moving towards renewable energy. By 2050, we want to be 100% on renewable energy. You saw the size of our fleet, so this is a massive challenge for us. We started introducing electric vehicles already, but there are several obstacles to this. So obviously, they have a not as big a route as the diesel vans, so they can't go without new energy as long. And then you have the problem of charging those cars. So you have you can either go for a rapid charge, which is 10 to 40 minutes, but very expensive, or a fast charge, which is 4 to 8 hours. So it's much longer, but it's much cheaper. So what we did here was, okay, we presented the students with this problem and we said, okay, do you have a solution for this? Obviously, the routes in the city, it's fine. We have small routes, but if you go to the countryside, routes can be vast, and we have to break those up, use different vehicles. We have to get an idea, how are we going to charge those vehicles? We can't charge them at the same time. Maybe we need a charging schedule. And then what the students can do is walk off, do their project, 2 weeks, we're supervising them, helping them, and they come back with a set of solutions that might be feasible or not, but you know, for us, it wasn't a lot of investment. We get a really nice scoping from the students, and we can then make a decision as business. Do we think there's something in there that we want to move forward? This was just to give you an idea of what you can do, really, and one of the few things we tried at Royal Mail, and I think it's brilliant. It's really important for us to have this link to academia, because it's a no-brainer. It's not a lot of money you invest, but you get so much back. And also for the team, it's great to stay in touch with research and with academia and feel you're still part of the, you know, like the latest advances of science. Yeah, with that, thank you very much. And I stop sharing my screen, I guess.
Perfect. Yes, thank you very much, Betty. It was really interesting just to hear a little tiny bit about what you guys are doing there at Royal Mail. And as with Reda, I've already got a few questions, and there's definitely more coming in from the audience. So if I could ask you to stop sharing now, I'll get you back at the end. And here we have George. So as mentioned, George is a Healthy Aging Challenge Director at UKRI, and he's going to share a short talk with us about the business of research collaborating to accelerate impact. So if I could ask you to share your screen, George, that would be great. And just as you're doing that, one final announcement, I did forget to mention it at the start. If any of your questions are for a specific speaker, if you could just put a little note of that when you're putting the question into the system, that would make my life a lot easier. So if you're ready, George, I will get out the way and leave you to it.
Yeah, David, thank you very much. And sort of by way of a little bit of introduction, so my background was as an engineer who moved into healthcare management. And that meant that I've often relied on data science and data scientists to understand really complex issues and visualize that insight to help us make the case for change. And you know, examples from my past would include data scientists working with health specialists to model out how many hospitals did the Republic of Ireland need over the next 15 years, how many care homes did they need, and what would that look like if they changed the way that their system worked. So it gives you an example of actually some really powerful stuff. And I think when I was working in healthcare management, we could probably never get enough data scientists to help us with the problems that we want. So we were always prioritizing the most important things. So I joined UKRI, or UK Research and Innovation, last year. It is the main UK government funder for research. And the research that we fund, he says, trying to get the slide to change. The research we fund covers a huge range of areas, from particle physics through to arts and creative economy, and includes support for the translation of research into business innovation, the topic for today, helping to connect tech and academia. And actually my role as director of the Healthy Aging Challenges bridges those worlds, and I'll explain that. So the context for my work is what's in the little box there, a wicked problem, or more accurately, an ambitious goal, a government goal to enable people to enjoy 5 extra years of healthy, independent life by 2035, whilst reducing the gap between the experience of the richest and poorest, or put another way, making more of the success that is the longer lives that most people are now living. And as we knew from studies from, for instance, the European Union's Silver Economy study, older people are an important demographic. In the UK, they hold something like 75% of the financial wealth. So important customers for people like ASOS and potentially Royal Mail as well. Yet growing that economy has proved really elusive, and there's been no shortage of innovation and government funding. In reality, much of that funding has been targeted at a perception of very high need. So we started to think about what we can do before people become dependent on governments of health and care services. So back to the wicked problem, we were embarking on a journey where the solution was unknowable at the start. The goal was there, and we needed to harness research in an agile way to support business innovation. And that's very much in the same sense that you heard Reda talking about earlier. So when we looked at what we were doing in more detail, it showed how the scope that we were covering was really vast, loosely defined by the 7 themes that you see here that contribute towards healthy living in later life. And these themes offer opportunities for actually quite a wide range of smart services with data science at the background. So just think about sustaining physical activity. It's actually already quite tech rich, but it's often targeted at millennials and elite athletes, and probably not well thought through and suited to a lot of people, from age 50 onwards. And then as I sort of go round clockwise around the thing, there's a lot around homes and communities. Smart homes offer some real possibilities, but often the current stuff has been designed more targeted at millennials so they can turn their central heating on and cook their turkey while they're driving back from work. They're less user-friendly for tech non-natives, but actually some sensors in the home could make a real difference to understanding how older people are living independently and well. And I know this from my own personal experience with parents and parents-in-law. The problem for data science is that you can collect an awful lot of information, but it's very difficult to turn it into actionable information that is an efficient delivery of a service. If you get too many false alarms, you generate a lot of cost. So there's a huge amount of data science work going into truly trying to understand how you use this work and how to apply it in a better way. And then as I sort of finish going round the clock face, if you like, we end up with aspects more usually associated with aging, cognitive impairment, and the impacts of aging. And we've seen tech as a huge enabler in the last 8 months for volunteering, for enabling people to stay in touch. And much of this work has actually really happened at what I call a hyper-local level. So one of the things that we're really interested in is what can we learn about all those individual things in a way that we can then scale them successfully. So what has this really got to do with tech and academia? And I suppose I've given you a couple of flavors. And our approach is sort of shaped by two big ideas. The first around early prevention, what can be done before people end up in hospitals. And here the challenge has often been framed as market making, particularly around finding sustainable business models. And of course, that did all start before we were hit by COVID. But what COVID has shown is the value of maintaining health in later years. So what are those sustainable business models, and what do people want to buy in terms of making that market? And again, that's applying some of the market analysis that you heard from ASOS into a new area. I think the second point comes from recognition that, as I've sort of said before, there's already been a lot of investment in innovation that hasn't gone to scale. So here, it's about services, innovations that involve technology at relatively high readiness levels, but with low business readiness. So there was less of a tech issue, and we needed to draw on a wider range of academic disciplines to understand and address the issues and be able to convert them into successful businesses. So our first set of initiatives are supporting business innovation with an ambition for scale and sustainability, both through direct funding and by attracting private investment into the sector. And when we select successful projects through competitions, we're always looking for how is this breaking ground, and how are the people who are proposing that project, businesses proposing that project, drawing on the academic expertise to get some cutting edge advice. But doing that in a piecemeal way wasn't enough. So we've also commissioned our own research program focused on business impact and enabling a greater sharing of the knowledge from the projects we fund into the outside world. And as I said, it's much less a technology issue, and it's more related to understanding what people actually want rather than assume what they need. And hence the emphasis for us has been on social, behavioral, and design research. But in reality, that's part of a multidisciplinary academic team, very much like the sort of mix of skills that you saw Betty illustrate earlier. So how does this work, and where does data science fit in? And I'm going to give you a couple of examples. I'll start with the sort of top left. Tribe, a project that we're currently funding, is looking at building local care economies using AI to understand where is there a care need, where are people coming forward and saying we need care, and where's care supply. And once you understand the mismatch between that supply and demand, working with people to identify volunteers and then digitally upskill them into eventually paid work to address that gap. So a really interesting application of AI and digital services into a problem that's been with us for a long time. If I move to the sort of top right, the University of East Anglia are in the process of spinning out an innovation that's about crowdsourcing information to raise standards in care homes. And that's particularly in developing countries where those homes are rapidly replacing in-family care, but the regulatory systems have yet to catch up. So it's not just being able to crowdsource and self-report, but understand the quality of that information that you're getting, the validity of it, in a way that drives business behaviors and creates a level playing field in a market. If I move to the bottom left, this is something different. It's not something that we've directly funded through my program, but is a wider UKRI program. A knowledge transfer partnership scheme is a scheme that helps businesses in the UK to innovate and grow by linking them with an academic or research organisation and a graduate placed in that organisation. And that gives businesses access to new skills and the latest academic thinking to deliver a specific strategic innovation project. In the example that I'm giving, the Extra Care Charitable Trust run retirement villages. They've had for a couple of years someone working on smart technology in the home. And the value of this has really been reinforced by the way that come COVID, the Extra Care Charitable Trust have been able to really rapidly deploy innovative smart technology as part of their COVID response. And again, that just shows how businesses and tech can benefit from that academic link. And then my final example comes from another project that we're funding around promoting business employee health and wellness, but particularly focused on small and medium-sized enterprises, which typically don't subscribe to corporate wellness schemes. And they've been working with the University of Central Lancashire to develop an assessment tool, working with the gyms and sports industry to upskill sports professionals to be able to do in a relatively low cost way to go out to businesses, have meaningful conversations with them and collect that data and continually improve the tool that they're using so that they achieve the impact that we want, which is a healthier workforce, but also are seen to deliver benefits to the gym's business delivering the service and the end users who are subscribing to it. So 4 examples of what we're doing. And I'll just lead with a sort of concluding slide, a couple of links for more information. So David, thank you very much.
Perfect. Thank you very much, George. And as before, lots of talking points there. So there's been some more good questions coming in. And we'll leave you there, George, and invite Nick to come back if possible, please. Welcome back, Nick.
Hi.
Welcome back.
Thanks,
welcome back. As I mentioned before, Nick is Deputy Challenge Director at Innovate UK. I'm going to go for it, Nick, in that it is in Smart Sustainable Plastic Packaging Challenge. Nailed it. Over to you, Nick.
That's the one. Thank you. Yeah, so I said my name's Nick Cliff. I'm Deputy Challenge Director for the Smart Sustainable Plastics Packaging Challenge. Or SSPP, as I'll call it. Now, SSPP is from the same family as George's program. And like George, I also have a nice little blue box. Although the words in mine describe our goal as being to try to sort of substantially reduce the amount of plastic pollution. Plastic pollution is a topic that still manages to find its way into the news amongst the most incredible American election for years, for in fact, COVID-19 pandemics, you still see coverage of it going on. Plastic pollution is a significant problem. So this slide, as far as I can work out, is probably the furthest we as a species have managed to spread plastic pollution. So this is a tiny little piece of plastic that was lost from one of the Mars landers, which puts it a very, very long way away, quite difficult to come up with a solution for that. But also, I think in some respects it represents the very nature of the paradox of plastic. It's an incredible material. It permeates and is used throughout our lives. Most of the industries and businesses and economic activity throughout the world in some way, shape or form depends on plastic, but it's also a serious and persistent plastic pollutant. That material will be sitting on the surface of Mars potentially for centuries to come. So, you know, we've even spread as far as other planets. Now, it is increasingly through understanding the data that we can get a grasp and a handle on the size of the challenge and start to identify and develop the most pragmatic and effective solutions for dealing with this challenge. So I won't talk through the data on this, but fascinating that one of the earliest forms of data representation, the Sankey diagram, really clearly shows the nature of the problem. Large amounts of material, plastic material used, in this case in the form of packaging, but only a tiny proportion, 2%, is actually reused, recycled, brought back into productive use. And an amazing 40% of this valuable material, we just chuck in a hole in the ground, and nearly a third is just lost out into the environment where it does all sorts of things that we're only just beginning to understand. The goal, what we're trying to achieve is this, you know, most recently described by the Ellen MacArthur Foundation, is that sort of nebulous goal of a circular economy in which a material, any material, in this case plastic, is properly valued. And rather than the linear take, make, use, dispose, forget, worry about the consequences later, a circular economy is one in which we move molecules around and around through multiple productive cycles, helping deliver growth and productivity, but decoupling it from resource use. As I'm sure everyone on the call knows, almost all plastics are still manufactured primarily from a finite resource, oil, natural gas, with terrible consequences if we don't take care of those at the end of time. And so we're focusing our research and trying to build collaborations between the best academic thought, the latest advances in data science, and the latest advances in all disciplines to come to bear on this problem and identify and develop innovative solutions to it. And, you know, things are starting to happen through working with researchers and understanding the data that they provide. Tangible, concrete examples of moving towards this more circular economy are taking place. With apologies for the terrible photo resolution, the plastic bag tax, now been running for 5 years, and has initially proved very successful in limiting the use of single-use plastic bags. That entire tax was based, believe it or not, governments following science, on quite careful modelling of the economic impacts of putting a charge on bags, trying to work out the best format for that tax to take, how consumers would respond to it. And now we're still applying research and analysing the data as we start to wonder about what we do next. How effective is it? How effective has it become? What might the next interventions look like in order to help deliver solutions to the plastics challenge? It was detailed environmental modelling and research that underpinned the recent ban on plastic microbeads. Some of those are, in fact, that's a sort of a snapshot of micropollutants captured in this case from the marine water column. Most of the stuff that's highly spherical are microbeads, things that are actually added to products to give them their sort of abrasive feel. Discovering where those were, tracking the data, analyzing that information, allowed the microbead ban to be introduced, and now also is acting as a driver for innovation as we start to see more and more material science companies developing non-polymer alternatives to microbeads. In some cases, utilizing novel materials, in other cases, using other organic materials. And that, again, that understanding of the data allowed us to innovate to try to address the problem. So we're looking at all sorts of things, and it's data that is helping us make these decisions. Understanding material flows and impacts. Where is this stuff going and what impact is it having when it gets there? Using huge amounts and increasingly things like AI and machine learning to drive materials development and new product design. It's remarkable what we can do now to sort of virtually test how new materials, new forms of plastics might behave, both when they're being utilized in products, but also how they might behave if they do escape into the environment. Lots of work to enable and underpin all the different strategies, like reducing the use of plastics through things like modeling impacts of lightweighting, stress testing, ensuring that plastics are still capable of performing their job, how things can be reused, and new technologies to facilitate recycling. And also, as we're really only just starting to become aware, what can data science tell us about how people and consumers behave? Because from a certain point of view, most plastic ends up in the environment because of us, because we don't put something in the right bin, or because we can't be bothered to go a little bit out of our way to put something into the right bin or a different bin. And all the time underpinned by trying to understand and describe the system in which plastics operates, and using data science to make the best and most positive choices for developing and changing the way we work with plastics. So just some examples of current projects. And what I've tried to do here is pick ones again where it's not just companies that are leading the way, but it's companies working with academics. In some cases, these are academically led programs. So this is some work that was recently undertaken by UCL, the big compost experiment. And this was trying to find out whether or not, increasingly we see products on the market that say compostable, put this in your home compost, providing that you've got a home compost site. But there's very little data, or there was very little data available, but about how these materials actually broke down in home composting heaps. There's no such thing as a standard home composting system. So the big compost experiment was citizen science. It engaged with hundreds of households, asking them to put items of compostable packaging into their compost heap at home, track and report back how that material was breaking down, leading to all sorts of insights into not just consumer behavior, but how these materials behave. And all of this information that was coming from the households can be cross-referenced because it's tagged with location, with weather patterns and ambient temperatures, so we could, rainfall levels. So we could really start to understand how these materials behave in the environment. Again, apologies for the awful resolution on that photo, but another aspect here is where we are starting to understand and design enzymes and microbes and optimizing microbes that can actually break down plastic, consume it, and possibly even convert it back into new polymers, offering a whole next generation of recycling technologies capable of processing a really wide range of materials, just chewing it up and returning that feedstock into productive use. Much more at the company end of things, a London-based company called Nopla, developing novel materials. In this case, those are seaweed-based sachets of ketchup. The company got a lot of press. Initially, they started with just creating globs of water that you could chew, really, rather than drink. They were great. Then they moved into, they've done a lot of work on cocktails, so you can have little cocktail pods at festivals where they don't really want plastic bottles and cups lying around. Most recently, they've moved into condiments. I don't advise popping one of those in your mouth, tomato ketchup. But again, working very closely, though, with delivery and logistics companies to work out how best to introduce this product into the marketplace. Where are the optimum points at which this kind of innovation can be implemented? Moving on, that's plastic waste, bales of plastic waste. Any material is only recycled if there's a market for that material. And with plastic, the price of those bales is pivotal to underpinning recycling. But quality challenges, understanding where the material is, tracking flows and optimizing logistics. For years, that was done with backhaul trucks, containers, lorries. But we're seeing more and more increasingly sophisticated systems, up to and including people experimenting with blockchains and open ledgers, trying to create unique identities for each one of those bales so they can be tracked back to facilities to help improve quality understanding and stabilize pricing. Another fascinating project. So this was one that was born directly out of some academic research in how you can actually make smart packaging. So packaging that facilitates effective sorting. Often recycling something is separating out different types of plastics, even what a product was used for before it was put into the recycling bin. And a whole range of compounds that fluoresce, so they're invisible to the human eye, but in a recycling plant, on conveyor belts, these things can be illuminated and all sorts of additional information can be pulled off the packaging. Depending on the mix and the blend of colors, you can discern what plastic, what material that was made from, if any additives have been added into the plastic, what its contents were previously. And that, coupled with automated sorting systems, allow huge volumes of plastic waste to be recycled at a really cost-effective way. Because if you can't make recycling viable, you won't, ultimately recycling won't be collected. Last couple of examples. Here's another one where this was a really strong example of an idea coming right from the very initial phases in a university department. In this case, Warwick University were considering how they might use fluidized beds to recycle plastic in a new way, not sort of chopping it up, melting it and so on and so forth, but actually almost converting it back into oil, allowing you then to make it back into new plastic. So this piece of equipment here started life as a thing called the Warwick fluidized bed process, and now is just at the cusp of installing its first full-scale commercial implementation. So fostering that connection from academia right the way through to spin out and now standalone business. And lastly, another big area for us, seeing a lot of interest at the moment, is around digital twinning. So the most recent project that I've funded is to invest in a big plastic sorting facility, utilizing some of the technologies I've talked about earlier. But for the first time, we think, certainly in the UK, possibly worldwide, that facility will be built entirely digitally first. So they'll actually be able to prove out the processes and optimize the layout and line speeds. And then when the thing is actually built in another 18, 24 months, the entire thing will be fully embedded, completely censored across the board, and we'll be able to monitor, tweak, and optimize the performance right throughout its life cycle. So, you know, data science increasingly is appearing throughout the projects we fund, and always looking at ways in which we can support academics and scientists and data scientists working with companies to solve problems. And like George, I'm going to sneak in a cheeky plug. We're actually running an event next week about a workshop really to bring together potential collaborators to look at how maths can support businesses in plastics reuse. So find us on via the UK CPN, which is the UK Circular Plastics Network. And if it's of interest to you, sign up, come along, and you might find someone that you can collaborate with. And who knows, I might even have some funding that could help develop the idea. Thank you.
There we go. Oh, struggled to find that mute button for a second there. Thank you very much, Nick. Mate, that was great. That was great. You've got a lovely voice as well, just to throw that in the mix. If I could invite all the panelists just to turn your cameras back on, turn your microphones back on. We've had a huge number of questions coming in, actually. In terms of the panel discussion, if I'm honest, I love the talks, but I look forward to asking the questions and kind of seeing what comes in from the audience. So I'm going to jump straight into it. I'll do my best to direct them to the appropriate place. I perhaps won't come to all of you for every question. Sometimes it might be one or two. Equally, if I've missed you and you feel like you have an opinion, by all means, just give me a little wave. So the first question I'm going to go to, it's a question from Louise Kirkham. She's directed it to Reda, so I'll start with you, Reda, but actually it'd be good to get another opinion on this one as well. First of all, Louise says, great talk, thank you. Can't remember the exact word you used, but it was around being able to explain your model and results to your stakeholders and the difficulty in explaining something that's quite complex. And I think, summarising the question a little bit more, how do you go about it, in your role to explain stuff to stakeholders, get backing, secure funding, secure resource and stuff like that? Have you got any tips around that side of things?
I think that's like a crucial point, really. What we're doing is not just productionized machine learning model, is really what we want to do is to change the way we operate. And we can't just go in a corner and develop a model in isolation. We need to engage with the stakeholders, understand them, and listen to what they're saying. There is often this black box image around machine learning models, around like how they function. And it's a bit like, okay, they will predict something, but you don't really know how they work. So it was crucial for us, especially on that example that I gave into the talk, to really engage on a regular basis with our stakeholders, to listen to them and not just like be in a one direction conversation. What we did is that in terms of like concretely, what we did, we created some sort of dashboard, or it was more like some sort of an animation, which was able to break down the demand and explain what were the features that were important in each of the cases. So it was just really adding this extra layer of explainability around the model, and that helped drive the conversation, not in a sense like we're here to replace you, but we're here to help you, and we can add something to what you do. And look, we approach this way, and it's a constant conversation. And it's not because we've secured budget or a new team that's working on this that it's all finished. The conversation needs to go on and continue. We do have these kind of jobs which I quite like to label them as translators. The translators, they are here to translate a business problem into a machine learning problem. They are here to, just act as an interface between scientists, engineers, and stakeholders.
Fantastic, thank you. Makes a lot of sense, and I think it probably is a challenge that most businesses will be coming up against. How does that look at either Innovate UK or UKRI? Maybe I'll come to you first, George, in terms of the type of stakeholders you have and getting buy-in and stuff like that.
Yeah, so I think it raises a really important thing, that communication of data is just as important as the analysis itself. I think probably never better illustrated. I'll probably get into hot water than we've gone into lockdown based on a series of graphs and all the rest of it. If you actually look at some of the opinion leaders, they come up with different interpretations of that. And I think what this points to is less what we do internally, but more what we're trying to encourage people to do, which is actually that interpretation comes from a much broader range of disciplines than just the sort of mathematics and the data scientists. And it's the power of teams working together, the power of multidisciplinary views. And in my case, I think particularly social and behavioral sciences have added a huge amount to trying to understand and interpret data that comes in and make better sense of it in a real world actionable sort of way. So I think that presentation and visualization is a skill in itself, but also there's an art to drawing in other people so that you get that right answer.
Perfect, thank you very much. The next question that I'm going to shoot to, and I'll come to you, Betty and Nick, for this particular one, is coming from Audra Gill. Audra's actually my sister-in-law. So it's nice when lives collide, isn't it? And we can all come together. So hi, Audra. Audra is asking essentially for the whole panel, but as I say, I'll come to Betty and Nick. Industry tends to need solutions on a much shorter time scale than perhaps what academic research would traditionally provide. Do you have any experience or ideas as to how this can be overcome? And what do you think is the ideal length for a research project for all to benefit? So I'll come to you first, Betty, and I'll be coming to you straight after Nick.
Do you hear me? Yes. I think it's an interesting one because it's true. So we have much tighter time schedules in the business, but also they have a different goal if you compare those two types of research. So academic research is really about, you want to maybe find a new technique, or really investigate a problem in depth, and you often don't have a very tight deadline. So when I did my postdoc, I obviously had a project that would span over years, and I would find new stuff that would add up to the overall solution that I could publish on the way. It's more like a journey. Whereas in the business, they just have a different goal. So they need something that's actionable, that's delivered quickly, and that will gain profit. So they are more focused on, we need a solution. It doesn't need to be, like you don't have the time to investigate in depth everything. We need something that's working now and that can give us some profit in the short term. So I think you will never have in a business the kind of research you see in academia, but rather and that's why academic engagement is fantastic and important, because you can still use the brilliant work that researchers are doing at university and implement them in your solutions in the business. So I think that's why I think those two should be really, really work closely together, and both will benefit from that. I mean, for the students in academia, it's fantastic to work with a business, because they get an idea of what are the goals in a business, which are quite different from academia. And they get this, this idea of how can they go out to the world and already have this business context they had worked in for a short time that they can present then if they're looking for a job, or
Perfect. Thank you very much. Nick, over to you.
My answer is it's not easy. It's not easy to do. Academia and business work at very different paces, speeds. And it's not always easy to reconcile the two. I mean, the way that we tend to work across UKRI, we where it comes to earlier academic level projects, what we generally, or one way that we approach this is where we're trying to ensure that cross-fertilization of ideas between academia and industry, help drive ideas out of the lab into the marketplace, is sometimes when it is purely academic funding, we tend to overlay and say, we know that you want to look at things, we know you want to explore. One of our guiding principles is that research is best governed by researchers. There's always problems telling researchers what to look at. They're a bit like cats, because I'm not an academic. Like, oh, what's that over there? That's interesting. And that's where the fun stuff happens. So when it's academically led, often what we'll ask is they're trying to work with industry. They're trying to make sure that they're drawing on industry input to guide and factor that into their work. More at the end that I work, where we're looking at business-led projects, there we would usually expect academics to come in perhaps to perform a specific function, maybe one that is, to undertake some specific analysis, maybe of data, maybe of materials, or maybe for them to help refine a particular process. So you try to compartmentalize the research functions, and particularly there, often the goal is to provide a level of expertise or access to equipment that isn't available to a typical small company, but might well exist in a university department. They, dive into some of the basements of universities across the UK, you find the most amazing stuff that you would never buy if you were a little innovative startup, but you can negotiate access to it. But yeah, it's a challenge, and all too often we do see projects struggle because business people don't appreciate the speed at which academics work, and academics don't always have the same, or aren't always responding to the same levels of pressures of business. So even just facilitating that discussion and very occasionally intervening to avoid fistfights is how we tend to manage it.
That's a skill. I like that, Nick. I like that. I'm actually going to bring you back in, Reda, and it loops into another question which we've had coming from Beto, but it very much follows on from this side of things. And he's talking about aligning research with business problems. And I'm bringing you back in because I know you guys at ASOS are very much innovating in lots of different areas, and I've been lucky to talk to you about that in the past. So I know that you have got that research academic approach, but you clearly are delivering, you know, financial targets and stuff like that as well. So in terms of ASOS, how are you approaching research to align it to the business goals? And does that involve multiple roles within the organization to do that? Or, you know, where does that come from?
Yeah, definitely. This is an interesting problem. I think the key thing for us, and I think you've used that word, is how do we envisage innovation? And it is important for a company like ASOS to be able to innovate for multiple reasons. Obviously, we've got like some clear financial objectives, and there's this kind of need of return on investment of an AI platform. But at the same time, we need to have the space to be able to innovate. And I think the way we are organizing ourselves is that we have like cross-functional teams that are focusing on certain business outcomes. And I'm insisting on this in terms of outcome. We're trying to shift away from thinking about projects, but more like thinking about like products or business outcome. And we try to leave some autonomy to the teams to be able to come up with new ideas. The key for us is that the most important thing is to be as transparent as possible. This is why we have like always this like short cycle time where we can explain what we've tried, what we've discovered in the data, what we've learned from reading some certain papers, and then we will be able to have this back and forth conversation. It's especially in machine learning, and we want it to be this way. It's not just one-way system. It's not just the business has a problem and then we come up with a solution. We can come up with innovative ideas and for problems that the business haven't had thoughts about, and we need to be able to have that space. So when we manage our teams, we have like different timescales for different products or projects, and we need to be able to manage that. We need to have a constant pace of like delivering things, but at the same time leave some space for some of our people to be able to innovate. And there's always opportunities to almost use what has been built to almost build on it. So a machine learning model can then be used for another big machine learning model for future generation, etc., etc. It's a complex problem, but it's fascinating and it's very interesting. The key thing is transparency. As long as you have that transparency and you are able to have that storytelling and show what you're doing, then you can go a long way. Obviously, buy-in from the business is very important.
Perfect. Thank you very much for sharing. I'm going to come to you with the next one, Betty, actually, because it's a very specific question for you, but I think it will benefit the audience as a whole. It's from Karen Scott. Karen was asking, in terms of the projects where you've engaged with universities, following, does the university come up with the projects and you kind of follow them and take people, or do you set the specifications and then go to the universities to get people to come in and work with you?
So just a short one with Reda, what he just spoke about. I agree. It's really important to have, to focus, have deliverables, but also have innovation, balance those both and be transparent for the stakeholders, keep in touch with them on a regular basis. Sorry, that was just wanted to add, that was really important. I think this is important.
This is what we want, Betty. I like it.
But with the university, so we are collaborating with the university in a way that they have the master students or PhD students, but then they have a round where they ask for a submission of some abstracts or some project ideas. So we will come up with a project idea, send them something. So in the end, they send a student, we will co-supervise the student. So the student is mainly supervised by the university and works for the university, but we will support them in their work. And we will provide the data and the problem that he is trying to address. But obviously the students themselves, they have more time to form this, take our problem and then make academic research. So really focus on this problem in an academic way, which is great for us because then we're benefiting with the really amazing results they come up with.
I love that. I love that. And in terms of, I'm going to follow that into actually another question, actually. And it's a question from Joe McFadden. And I guess obviously you guys are, fairly large organizations and have fairly large teams, and you are successfully working with academia. Joe's question was actually around, how big are your teams, and do you think the team size affects how best you can engage with academia? And I guess following on from that, you know, what are the options if you are a smaller organization, and what you're talking about sounds good, but you know, how do you do it? So I'll actually come to perhaps Nick first, and then we'll see where we go from there.
Well, so in some respects, our organisation is vast, because we're all part now of this UK research and innovation. There's thousands of us, all not currently in Swindon, because we're all working from home, which we talked a little bit about before the call started, the joys of being in Swindon. But we tend to break down into sort of quite small groups. There's 6 of us in the plastics challenge. I don't know how many there are in George's team, but we manage the process, we manage the funding. When it comes to the sort of what size of organisation can interact with academia, I think it's about finding the way that works for you. If you're a large organisation and you don't have someone whose role it is to be in touch with, and whose team it is to be in touch with what's happening in academia, then I would strongly suggest that you look at it quite seriously and, forge those links. And speaking as the funding body, more and more academic funding is now needing to see industry engagement. So academics are out there wondering how to get hold of you in business to help them build better proposals for research. Lots of small companies are academic spin-outs. So they've literally emerged from the university space. So capitalize on those links. And something you should mention, one way that you could dabble, if you like, in working more closely with academia, UKRI run a program called Knowledge Transfer Partnerships, or KTPs. Google that, you can find some information. But that's specifically funding for small and large businesses to directly engage a recent graduate to work on research-based activity. Now, we don't cover all the costs, but we could substantially offset the costs and help you develop a link in a topic that's right for your business at the stage it's at when you make the application.
I feel like we're going to be inundated with funding requests. I'll be coming to you specifically, Nick. It's perfect. I'm going to change tack a little bit. There is a lot of questions and I'm conscious of time, so I'm looking to get a breadth of the conversation going. I'll come to you actually next, George, and then either come to Reda or Betty after this to get a bit of commercial perspective as well. In terms of how you pick what to fund, obviously for you, George, it's very specific in terms of you have an allocation of funding to give. Commercial perspective, you can't pick every idea, so it'll be like, which ideas do you pick? But I'll come to you first, George. Obviously, when you're looking at allocating funding, how do you approach it?
So, I mean, the first thing you've talked about is about a scope of what we do, which is probably the very basics. But maybe if I just use an example. So one of the things that we do is we call an investment accelerator. So that's working with private investors so that we invest together in businesses. So they get a solution that is 100% funding. So most of our funding has a percentage limit to do with international trade law and stuff like that. So we work with investors. Why are we working with investors? Not just to give 100% solution, but what we found is that we tend to be really good at looking at a project and saying, is the project got a really good scope? Is it well founded? Has it got the right expertise? Has it got a good plan to deliver? Investors actually tend to look much more at, does this business have legs? Does it have the right leadership team? Does it have the long-term vision? Once we've been through the sort of the project phase, do they know how to get access to additional finance so that they can grow? And so the partnership is about trying to bring together the perspective that we've had that's worked very well in the past, but actually be more successful by also bringing a business perspective or an investor perspective into growing that business.
Yeah, a venture capital approach almost is probably the way. In terms of you, Reda and Betty, I'll come to both of you actually, because I think this will be useful that are joining from a commercial background. Obviously, I'm guessing you guys have got a roadmap. How do you prioritise your workload, your ideas, what you tackle first, and then, you know, where you put your energy?
You want to go first, Betty? I mean, like, for us, prioritization is always a big problem. It's hard. It's super hard. Now, the way we are, and it's a constant back and forth, and you never know if you got it right. But the way we are structured is that we are focusing on those business outcomes. We have like some sort of like objective and key results kind of a way of seeing things. So it's more important of how we make an impact and how we can move those dials instead of like focusing on the projects themselves and the solutions. So focusing more on how we can move some of the numbers instead of like focusing on the projects themselves. But then, yeah, it's complicated. Prioritization is, and I'm not talking just about machine learning and data science. In the whole software world, it is something that is hard. It's a hard problem. The only way you do this is that you have like some sort of vision, and these objective and key results give us some sort of framework into what we are trying to achieve in the specific things. And then you iterate and you try to see how much of an impact you're making on those dials. In machine learning and data science, the things you are not working on are as important as the things you are working on. So you really need to choose the kind of like problems you want to solve.
Thank you. And coming to you, Betty, I'm there. The hand was up and everything. Come on, let's do it.
I was to say it's an interesting question, because at the moment we are actually working on an improved way to score our projects, to sort of find a scoring system that we can base on strategy. So how well aligned is a project with the strategy of the business, with the overall strategy of technology, but additionally also trying to find out what would it take early in the project, try to find out what would it take to implement that project in business. So how many different teams, as a size, you know, Royal Mail is a huge company, so we need to understand who else will be involved in this project and who will be the person or the people that will implement that will use our product. So obviously this plays a role how challenging it will be to implement something and have it running live in the business. And I think what we're doing here is what an ideal solution is. It's not always working that way, but that you try to build an MVP really quickly, so a minimal viable product that works, and implement it. First implement it, have a look whether this is possible. And once you see, okay, we have the end-to-end pipeline ready to go, then you can go back and say, okay, now we're starting this cycle of improving the model or coming up with a better result. Because you're already, everything else is set. So there's not a whole lot missing. Because the problem, what might happen in data science is often you start a project, you do this amazing data science, you do your sprints, your cycles, and you try to engage with the stakeholders. And then in the end, you come to a point where you might realize, oh, there's actually a completely other person that is using this product or that will be involved in the end, and they are not on board, or we haven't spoken to them, or, you know, like, so it's really important that early on you try to, what you build, implement it, and then have a look, does it work? If it does work, then we can continue to build a whole data science project around it.
Fantastic. Thank you very much, Betty. I'm going to go to a bit more of a general question, actually. It's coming now from Harmeet. He's talking about, he currently works in academia, and he's about to move into more of a commercial role in the data science industry. What's the most important piece of advice you can give? And do you know what? I'll go to all four of you actually to get something on this. So I'll start with you, George. Something short and sweet for Harmy, who's moving from academia into commercial roles.
So I'm going to cheat and say two things. Firstly, you're entering a field, not an industry. So just look at the variety of companies that we've talked about. And my second piece of advice would be a general one. Pick an industry that you really believe in and want to make a difference in, because that will bring out where you want to apply your skills best and how you be most valuable to future employers.
Perfect, thank you. I'll come to you, Reda, next, please.
Yeah, there's so many answers that come to mind. Be curious, be a team player. Don't focus too much on the technology. The technology, they come and go quite fast. Focus on the problem, get stuck in. Yeah, look at the culture inside your team, inside the industry. This is important because the team culture will condition a bit like how you perceive this world. I'm not giving a short answer, I'm realizing. But yeah, yeah, go for it. I would encourage him to get stuck in.
Perfect. It was shortish for you, Reda. I've definitely had longer ansers.
I know.
I'll come to you next, and then I've saved you for last, Nick, because it's hardest. Sorry. Over to you, Betty.
So if you're just coming from academia, I think you need to build up a network quickly, because you will soon be on the job market. Go to events such as Data Science Festival, try to meet people, try to engage with other companies, try to find out what's out there. Yeah, and yeah, good luck.
Perfect. I like that. Sorry, Betty, I was laughing away there, and I was actually laughing at Nick.
Yeah,
I'm assuming that's one of your children manhandling.
Right. All the above. Something short and sweet. More of a sort of a guiding suggestion. Don't necessarily think of it as a once in a lifetime move. I think that we overall as a society would benefit from more movement backwards and forwards between industry and academia. Enjoy the freedom to explore any idea that occurs to you within academia, get yourself into that mindset, but then take some time in industry, if the opportunity presents itself, where there's going to be a lot more focus. There's going to be a lot more requirement to concentrate on a specific task with a view to a very specific goal. But then when you get sort of before you get too locked into that and lose the capacity to dream, which is very important, maybe go back. I realize that makes huge assumptions about your ability and capability to move between the two and all the associated elements of, you know, salary and pensions. I totally recognize it's not easy, but there's so much to be gained by experiencing both and not forgetting, well, not where you came from exactly, but where you are at that point in time.
That's a very interesting take on it, actually. And I think you'll probably find that people that move from academia into the commercial world, they always have that fondness of it. And I think my first job was actually in a university in the IT department there. And I still look back on it as the best job I've ever had, to be honest. But there you go. There you go. I'm going to ask a question of you next, Betty. And I know we've talked about this in the past. You're definitely going to have an opinion on it. And I'll probably come to you afterwards as well, Reda, obviously coming from the commercial background that you're in at the moment. So question specifically is, do you think research in the commercial sector, you know, it's a luxury or is it a necessity?
Yeah, so I think, so first of all, I think luxury is the wrong word, because for businesses, it's not a lot of money to invest. Academic engagement, it doesn't cost a lot of money. So it's definitely not a luxury. I think it should be more viewed as a necessity. And you should take it as a benefit you have as a business. If you have a data science team, they all have academic backgrounds. They have this link to academia. So you have a team in your company that have these links and they can easily build on and, you know, get this connection to the latest research and to the latest science. So you should take advantage of that. It's a no-brainer. I don't understand why businesses would think it would be a luxury when you can clearly only benefit. The return that you get from your investment in academic engagement is massive. All this extra brilliant research and work that people will do for a business, for your project. It's great. And additionally, it will help your data science team. You know, a lot of them, because of their strong links to academia, it will help retention of these brilliant minds that you have, because obviously they want to stay in touch with the latest research in their field. They want to still feel that they are part of the science thing that is happening at the university. So you can, and additionally, you get these students in that work on projects in a company that is basically already like a long interview. So you see how they work, you see what they do, you understand a bit better who they are, and afterwards you can take advantage of that and just acquire some of those talents. So I think it's great, and companies should do this.
You're on mute, Dave.
Yeah, I didn't hear you. I was like,
I've been going to say, well, this is like the fourth event of the week. So I'll come to you one split second, George. I will come to you. At ASOS, is it a luxury or a necessity?
I think both of those words are wrong. For us, it's clearly part of a strategy. It's I was mentioning the world culture. This is part of like what we're trying to build here in ASOS. I mean, it's, as Betty was saying, it's a bit of a no-brainer in terms of like visibility, in terms of recruitment and retention, in terms of like innovation as well. It gives us this kind of other option that we can like tap in just to potentially bring some exciting people, just to get some new perspective around like some problems. And it gives like some sort of new blood inside the team. Once in a while, we get some PhD interns, we get some CDT groups that are in there. It's quite vital for us, and I think it's quite essential. So for a company like ASOS, for the size at which we operate, it's a no-brainer. It's, as Betty mentioned, it doesn't cost that much. I shouldn't say that, but anyway. And it's really part of this whole strategy in terms of what do we stand for as an AI and data science platform.
Perfect, mate. Thank you very much. George, your hand was half up there.
You know, luxury implies you can get rid of it. What I would say is research by the London Business School, looking at companies that were successfully coming through the financial crash, so whatever that was 12 years ago, was the ingredients for success for those companies was staying close to their customers and continuing to invest in innovation. And so I don't think you could call that a luxury. And I think data science is absolutely central to coming up with good answers.
Perfect. Sounds very sensible. I'm going to kind of draw things to a close. This will be the last question, and again, I will come to each of you to get your take on it. Obviously we're in a pandemic at the moment. It's very uncharted territory and stuff like that. So I was looking to get a bit of a forward-thinking question in there in terms of what you think things will look like over the next 12 months. So it's a little bit general, be it around research, just be it around your wider sectors and stuff like that. But do you think that COVID-19 will have a longer term impact on the research sector? Are companies perhaps going to struggle for funding? Are they going to struggle for time and resource? And yeah, basically, what do you think the next 12 months are going to look like? So I'll probably start with you. Well, would anyone like to start? And then we'll work around from there. Oh, George, you were first. Well done.
Sorry, I thought Nick was there. So just we know that there are financial implications to companies, and they're finding it really tight. We know that in many companies furloughed research departments, universities furloughed research departments in those early stages. I think from our point of view, we see renewed importance in getting government money flowing into those departments so they're not lost, and that we can continue to innovate. I have absolutely no doubt it's going to be tough, but I think it's really important that the world will have changed, not necessarily crystallizing exactly what we've got now, but the world will have changed, and it's really important that we're investing in research and innovation to make the most of those new opportunities.
Fantastic. Nick?
So everything George said, I mean, I'll come at it from a slightly different perspective. Yeah, I think that what's happened over the last 8-9 months, the pandemic, has had substantial and serious impacts across almost everything, all aspects of life, business, and what have you. And the quicker you can understand and adapt and start to innovate around the impacts, the more likely you are to come back out of this successfully. We've seen incredible innovation, by small businesses, cafes, food distributors shifting to home delivery systems really rapidly. It's that kind of response that we're going to need. And purely from the perspective of what I do, the focus areas for me, we're right in the middle now of an enormous headache in terms of PPE. It used to be PPE, really, you only found it in medical waste streams, in hospitals, and systems were in place there. It was well understood. Suddenly it's everywhere. Street sweepings, home recycling bins, home refuse bins. And legislation requires, when you identify potentially contaminated material, it causes all sorts of problems. So there's so many opportunities, stroke challenges that this pandemic has brought up. And go out there, understand them, and then try to research and come up with solutions.
Yeah, I like that idea of viewing challenges as opportunities. You're an optimist, Nick. I like that. It's good. It's good. I'll come to you, Betty, and then we'll finish everything with you, Reda, if that's okay. So over to you, Betty.
I think I'm worried that it will have an impact on future academic engagement. I hope it will not, because I think it shouldn't. If you look at it, as I said earlier on, the investment, the things you get in return, like even if you have different projects, you know, not all of the projects you have with academia will be a success for the business. You know, let's be honest about it. You might have master projects that won't be implemented and that won't gain, you know, a lot of revenue or cost saving. But then you have these occasional projects that give you such a massive cost saving or revenue that it pays out for all the others or the other projects. So I would hope that businesses will not cut funding for academic engagement, but I'm worried that obviously it's a quick thing you can do and show you saved some money somewhere. But I hope this will not happen. So try to stay positive.
I like that, Betty. Well done, well done. And last but not least, over to you, Reda.
I would agree with Betty. I mean, it would be foolish to say that nothing will change. Obviously, the world has changed. We've seen like a big reshuffle in some companies that like completely, some industries are really suffering a lot. Fortunately for us, for like online retailing, it's almost the world has changed as well. And what we were seeing before is evolving. So I do believe that in these uncertain times, there will be a more need for like this data-driven approach. I know it sounds a bit like a buzzword, but like this kind of academic partnership, especially around data science and how we can like make most use of the data to understand what this new world is where this new world is going, will be decisive factors for some of the companies that can make best use of it. So it's, as Nick was saying, these are opportunities, and the companies that have the courage to insist on those kind of partnership will come out better than the ones who make the quick savings at the moment. But it's an uncertain world, and I do understand that it's a challenging world.
It's up in the air. It's up in the air for sure. Well, drawing things to a close there. Personally, I've really enjoyed it. I love this format of event, the short, sweet lightning talks, and then a bit of a discussion at the end. It always brings out the best. There was loads more questions to get to, but maybe we'll follow up with you guys afterwards and try and turn it into a blog post or something like that. But just as a close, let's thank all of you guys for joining at home, and thank Reda, Betty, George and Nick for giving up their time to share with the Data Science Festival today. Thank you all very much.
Thank you, Dave.
We will see you soon.
Organizing.
Thank you.
Good luck to all those data scientists out there.
Love it.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Cheers.